Teresa Crofts, CEO of Maple Street.
Mike Crofts, the president of Maple Street. Maple Street was a company that provided vendor management services to community banks and credit unions across the United States. When we started our business, we looked at the industry and noticed that there were already a lot of software companies, and it was just burgeoning to become software as a service. So we decided to do something very different and instead focus on being a service company that had software instead of being a software company with a little bit of service. We also did a lot of research on what vendor management is and was or could be. And from that, we were able to identify a way to do vendor management for our clients that not only helped them meet certain regulatory requirements they had, but could also significantly reduce their expenses and help them measure and improve vendor performance, two things that no one else in the industry was or even is still talking about today. That led us to be significantly different in a way that provided value to our clients. We first really encountered the SBDC after we had submitted an entry to be considered a Florida company to watch. It was actually supported by Grow Florida. And we submitted the application, and lo and behold, we were chosen as one of that year's 50 companies to watch in the state of Florida. I believe it was about 2012. That kind of got us on everybody else's radar, and that's when we really got information first about SBDC. I contacted them and was put in touch with some folks about the educational programs that SBDC had. Not really having an extensive experience as running a business, I found that those were interesting and started attending those on a regular basis and learned a tremendous amount. Essentially, it was a business administration degree on the fly. And those courses were instrumental. Key one was what is competitive strategy. And that course that I took through SBDC is what led us to define a competitive strategy that I think made all the difference in what we do. And from there, we engaged with SBDC for a couple of advisory boards.
We had a voluntary board of directors for about 4 or 5 years, I think, and they were very instrumental in helping us at an inflection point in the company where we were starting to grow more. We weren't really sure how to grow, and we weren't sure how to balance being owners and having a personal interest in the company. And they helped us come up with that separation. I remember the first time they said, you pay yourself first. And that was really key to us starting to, I think, treat it more like a company where for us, we felt like we never looked at the company as our personal bank account. We looked at it as a company, and we always kept that separation. And then the board of directors taught us to be very disciplined about setting goals and annual goals and cascading those throughout the company. We didn't initially get into traction, which works really well, not through that board, but certainly that preceded our thirst for some way to get very organized and put some structure around the company. And so that was incredibly helpful. I didn't join the CEO Exchange until the last few years that we were in it, and found those meetings incredibly interesting and fun. And it was great to be with other people that were like-minded and certainly shared in some of the challenges that we were addressing together.
Yeah, the boards we had really challenged us. We had a board that was very good at pointing out to us that we hadn't thought something through, or there were things we didn't know, and challenged some of our thinking that shook us up and got us out of, I think, a mindset that was counterproductive at times and kept us on that track. We then started using traction, and that made some difference. I was fortunate enough to get in the CEO Exchange group early on when it was first starting, and was in it for a long time, including the time that Teresa was part of it. I found it incredibly rewarding on a number of levels. As I said, I'm still learning, so it was a great opportunity to learn. But just being in a room with other CEOs that were facing the same problems and challenges that I did every day was great because there was a lot of discussion about how to deal with those problems, solutions that people had, and also a way just to get you thinking creatively about the business instead of working in it, you could work on it. And also made a lot of friends. So I've always joked that misery loves company. And so being on that CEO exchange made me feel like I wasn't alone and addressed some of my natural paranoia that I was engaging in at the time too. Before we started working with the SBDC, the business was growing, but it was middling a bit. At that time, Teresa was not part of the company, helping me on the sidelines. Um, and there were a lot of things to do, and I was trying to do all of them. And so one of the first things that helped us was our growth acceleration advisor. Talked to us and convinced me that it was time to start hiring people to start managing other people and to helping with managing and growing the business. So I made a brilliant move in hiring my partner here to take a huge pay cut and work longer hours to join me in the company. So that advice made a huge difference because as soon as that happened, Teresa has a gift for organization, managing people, strong HR background. I don't. I'm good at sales and marketing. And so we divided into those lanes that we talked about. And when Teresa got things organized, she made it much more efficient. But I also focused on sales and the growth and the revenue numbers. And so we can go back and track the financial statements and see when Teresa joined and we split up and took that advice from SBDC, the revenue line started to grow. We were doing maybe about $1 million a year at that time. And in the next 10 years of our 20 years, we grew that to over $20 million a year in revenue. We went from a few employees at the time we sold the business, we had 40 employees, and we were continuing to grow year over year. Um, as well as expanding the brand and had just expanded to now have a sales team for the first time and really start to go after the market when we made the decision to sell the business. So that initial kick in the backside that we got from SBDC really made a huge difference right at the start. And then we took advantage of all the other services that were available to us. When and if the day comes you decide you want to sell your business, I think it's important to realize you just don't flip a switch and then it happens. There's a journey that has to go on. You have to plan for what that looks like. Finding the right buyer is going to take some time, and you don't want to rush it because there are a number of potential buyers that you might not want to work with even after you've spent time talking about it. When we started on the journey, we were thinking it would be about a year, but it actually took about 3, 4 years until we finally sold the business. We kissed a few frogs along the way, and went down the road and found that to be a learning exercise itself. Sure. And from that, then we finally did find a new buyer. Now it's about transitioning, having worked 6, 7 hours a day for over 20 years, to being retired. So far, so good. It's fitting pretty well, but there is a transition that has to go on with that too. It's worthwhile, but it's real.
I would add the transition, there's really two. There's a personal transition and there's a professional transition. The professional transition is knowing what you want when you leave your company. Do you still want to be involved in it? Do you want to just, hand over the keys and walk away? And you need to get your ego adjusted to what you're going to do because it's going to feel different than anything has felt since you've been in charge. And then on the personal side, we hear the cliches, you've got to have something to retire to. You should have something or some plans for how you're going to spend this time. Because as a business owner, you're kind of all that, you know, people call you ma'am or sir, and people take instruction and guidance from you. And then when you retire, you sell your business or you just quit working, you're just a guy and a gal. And you got to be prepared for what the next phase of your life looks like. And ours looks like I'm going to Paris and he's going fishing in Paris with me. Well, my advice to an entrepreneur, a business owner considering working with the SBDC would be do it. You've got nothing to lose and nothing but upside to having access to the expertise, to the support, to the helping you put a foundation in place, especially if you're someone who's never done it before. I mean, there's a lot of trial and error that you can get the advice of experts to help you mitigate some of the pitfalls that if you don't have some help, you're inevitably going to fall into. And so I would say absolutely do it and have actually recommended it to several of our friends who are either have small businesses or are contemplating starting a business.
Again, I would echo what Teresa says. If you had an opportunity to work with the SBDC, get on it. Don't wait. Just dive in and take advantage of everything that you can do. It does make a big difference. Learning. It also forces you to take opportunities to think about working on your business instead of working in your business.
Mhm.
Especially when you're first starting, you're still doing the work. You're spending all of your time doing that. And a lot of things that could be never happen because you just don't have the time. And so the SBDC helped us understand that and led us to take time to make sure we were working on the business. And that made a huge difference for us in terms of growing the business over a long time.
There's also a lot of disciplines in business, and no one can do everything. So the SBDC can give you some marketing expertise. They can give you some human resource expertise. They can give you some finance expertise. And while you might have a great idea as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of other things that need to come together to take that idea and build it into a business. And again, you've got a council right there that's willing and able to help you.